Coming up on Arirang News. President Yoon will visit Washington, D.C. to attend the NATO Summit next week, marking the third time in a row. Ahead of the summit, he is to stop in Hawaii to visit U.S. Indo-Pacific Command. Samsung Electronics predicts its second quarter profit to exceed 10 trillion Korean won, beating market projections. This on the back of a recovery in demand for memory chips. LG Electronics too forecasts to see record-high operating profits for the second quarter. Sir Keir Starmer is to become Britain's next Prime Minister as the Labour Party swept to power, ending 14 years of Conservative government. Welcome to 9 p.m. edition of Arirang News. I'm Kim Bo-kyung. President Yoon will travel to Washington next week to attend the NATO Summit for the third year in a row. This comes against the backdrop of the recent strengthening of military cooperation between Russia and North Korea. And the presidential office says there will be a strong message. Our correspondent Kim Do-yeon starts us off.
For the third year in a row, President Yoon will attend the NATO Summit, this year being held in Washington, D.C. The presidential office announced the trip on Friday, adding that Yoon will also stop off in Hawaii before the summit to visit the United States Indo-Pacific Command.
The summit's held in Washington, D.C., where the North Atlantic Treaty was signed on April 4, 1949, marking the founding of NATO, carries historical significance. Considering the importance of cooperation with the Indo-Pacific region, NATO has extended invitations to the IP4 nations, South Korea, Japan, Australia and New Zealand, for 3 consecutive years.
As for the brief itinerary, the president will leave Seoul on Monday night. Arriving in Hawaii on Monday, he will go straight to pay his respects at the National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific, informally known as the Punch Bowl, where around 10,000 Korean War veterans and their family members have been laid to rest, along with servicemen and servicewomen from World War II and the Vietnam War. On Tuesday, he's set to visit the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, where he will be briefed by the commander regarding ongoing security issues in the region.
Since 2018, when the U.S. Pacific Command became the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, this is the first time for a South Korean president to visit the headquarters. The visit will showcase the strong solidarity of the ROK-US alliance and serve as an opportunity to enhance cooperation between the two countries for peace and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific region.
President Yoon will arrive in Washington, D.C. on Wednesday, where he will kick off his NATO-related engagements with bilateral talks with some members' leaders, including new entrants, Sweden and Finland, and the Czech Republic. On Thursday, he's expected to have a summit with the IP4 leaders. Also, after attending the NATO Summit itself, Yoon is set to give a speech at the NATO Public Forum before returning to Seoul. While the NATO members will address the prolonged war in Ukraine, the summit also comes against a backdrop of Russia and North Korea's strengthened military cooperation.
A strong message will be sent regarding the military cooperation between Russia and North Korea, and in response, there will be discussions on ways to strengthen cooperation between NATO allies and IP4 partners.
All in all, the presidential office said that the core concept of this trip is to strengthen South Korea's security through global cooperation. In fact, an official said that there will be an opportunity for just the IP4 members to send a message to Russia and North Korea to showcase the solidarity in the region. While the possibility of a trilateral summit between Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo to follow up on the Camp David summit was raised, an official at the presidential office said that while it is open to all possibilities, it won't focus overwhelmingly on arranging one. In fact, the schedule is packed for this trip, and there are still opportunities for a summit throughout the rest of the year. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
With President Yoon expected to hold a series of meetings with NATO member countries next week, our correspondent Oh Soo-young spoke to a global security expert on what those talks will focus on.
South Korea and NATO countries are expected to express their solidarity against the growing military ties between Russia and North Korea and seek practical cooperation in arms and cybersecurity. That's according to Ramon Pacheco Pardo, Professor of International Relations at King's College London, as Seoul's top office announced that President Yoon Suk-yeol will meet with various European leaders on the sidelines of the NATO Summit in Washington, D.C. Speaking with Arirang News, Pacheco Pardo said Yoon's attendance at the annual summit is likely to be received with support for South Korea's objection to the recent military and economic treaty forged by Moscow and Pyongyang, agreeing to aid each other militarily upon aggression.
South Korea's standing has grown in recent years, especially since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, with South Korea providing all sorts of support for the Zelensky government. So I do think that there is a keen interest among European NATO members in meeting with President Yoon and in getting his support for Ukraine and vice versa. They will be willing to express their support for South Korea as Russia and Pyongyang strengthen ties.
NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg last month expressed concern about the growing alignment between Russia and the likes of North Korea, China and Iran. As such authoritarian actors increase their cooperation, Pacheco Pardo said Seoul's relations with NATO countries will become more practical and elaborate.
So they will focus on, for example, South Korean arms sales to different European countries, whether this is to support Ukraine or for these countries to keep those weapons. I think there will be talk about defense industry cooperation, which is an area of interest for many European countries, starting with Poland, but not only Poland. We see Romania, for example, now moving in that direction.
He added that Baltic states in particular would seek stronger cybersecurity cooperation with Seoul.
They're on the same boat because they have to defend themselves against these cyber attacks on civilian infrastructure, on private firms, but also obviously on ministries of national defense, the military as well. And there is this need for information sharing, joint exercises, sharing intelligence as well about how these cyber attacks take place. Also, obviously, many of these cyber attacks, they don't target one particular country only. We have seen with North Korea in the past targeting multiple countries at the same time. Same with Russia.
With geopolitical uncertainty ahead for South Korea and NATO countries, especially as a change in US leadership could affect Washington's relations with its allies, Pacheco Pardo emphasized the need for continued cooperation between Indo-Pacific and transatlantic actors on the working level, from military and defense industry to supply chain resilience and economic security. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Shifting gears to the economic front, Samsung Electronics saw earnings surprises in its operating profit in the second quarter, led by a recovery in the chip sector. LG Electronics also saw record high results in operating profits. Park Go-nu tells us more.
Samsung Electronics saw an earnings surprise in the second quarter of this year, beating market expectations. According to Samsung's preliminary data released on Friday, the company's operating profit was over 10.4 trillion won, or $7.5 billion. That's an on-year increase of more than 1,450%. And it was the first time in 7 quarters since quarter 3 of 2022 for Samsung to exceed operating profits of 10 trillion won. Higher demand for memory chips due to an expansion of the AI market, as well as higher prices of semiconductors, mainly attributed to the earnings surprise. Sales were up too by 23% on year, recording 74 trillion won, or around $53.6 billion. LG Electronics also released its preliminary data on Friday, showing a record high for both its operating profits and sales. The company's operating profit in quarter 2 saw an on-year jump of over 60%, resulting in over 1.1 trillion won, or around $800 million. That's the first time ever that the company has exceeded 1 trillion won during any second quarter. In addition, sales were up by 8.5% compared to the year before. That was mainly due to the company's home appliance business, including air conditioners, one of its core businesses, outperforming its competitors.
Sales for LG's AI technology air conditioners soared on year by more than 80% in June. And better business-to-business performances such as heating, ventilation, and air conditioning appliances and subscriptions also attributed to the company's profit results. Park Gonu, Arirang News.
The latest trade data show that in May, South Korea's current account has not only swung into the black, but it logged the largest surplus seen in 2 years and 8 months on the back of robust chip exports. Our Lee Soo-jin explains.
South Korea recorded its largest current account surplus in over 2 years in May on the back of strong exports. Preliminary data released by the Bank of Korea on Friday showed that the country's overall current account balance in May recorded a surplus of $8.9 billion. That's the largest surplus seen in 32 months or since September 2021. It's also a turnaround in just 1 month from April when the current account swung into the red for the first time in a year on the back of increased dividend payments to foreign investors. By category, the goods balance, which tracks imports and exports of products, recorded a surplus of $8.7 billion, up from $1.8 billion the previous year and marking the 14th consecutive month of a surplus. Exports rose 11.1% year-on-year in May to $58.9 billion on the back of strong demand for semiconductors. Outbound shipments of chips rose 53% compared to the previous year, with exports of other items such as information and communication equipment, oil products, and automobiles also seeing an upward trend. And by region, exports to Southeast Asia saw the largest rise, followed by the United States and China. And the services balance once again recorded a deficit of $1.2 billion, which was larger than that of a year ago when it came to $910 million, but less when compared to 1 month ago when it logged $1.6 billion. A Bank of Korea official said that he expects the current account balance to continue to record a surplus with the ongoing rise in exports.
June will see a large surplus in the current account balance. We forecasted in May that the current account balance for the first half to record a surplus of $27.9 billion, and as of May it had already logged a surplus of $25.4 billion.
He added that while the higher-than-expected current account surplus in the first half may lead to the nation surpassing the country's projection for its annual current account balance, there are still uncertainties ahead, such as fluctuations in international oil prices and growth in the overall global economy. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
Britain's Rishi Sunak, during his final Downing Street speech on Friday, said he will resign as Prime Minister and that he takes responsibility for the devastating election loss. He also expressed his intention to resign as Conservative Party leader, but said he would stay until arrangements are made for a replacement. This came after the Labour Party won the general election in a landslide on Friday, unseating the incumbent Conservatives after 14 years. Labour won over 410 seats, while the Conservatives won around 120. Following the Labour Party's victory, leaders across Europe have called for close cooperation with the UK. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said on social media that she anticipates to cooperate within a constructive partnership to address common challenges and strengthen European security. Also, leaders of European countries, including France and Italy, spoke about their desire to keep cooperative relationships with the UK. And Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has requested continuous support for his country. Meanwhile, the Labour Party has been coming up with European-friendly pledges, such as rebuilding relationships with allies like France and Germany, as well as a new security agreement with the EU. Prospects of peace in Gaza are slowing but tangibly growing as Israel and Hamas appear committed to hammering out a ceasefire and hostage release deal. Choi Soo-young explains.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has agreed to send a delegation to negotiate a new ceasefire and hostage deal with Hamas. The announcement comes a day after reports emerged that the Palestinian militant group has sent a new ceasefire proposal. David Barnea, the director of the Mossad, Israel's intelligence agency, will visit Qatar, the mediator country, as the head of the negotiating team. Hamas also stated that they have agreed to some of Israel's proposals positively. According to Reuters, ceasefire negotiations are set to start on Saturday. This raises hopes for a breakthrough. The Israeli Prime Minister's office said that Netanyahu had also discussed a new ceasefire and hostage release deal over the phone with US President Joe Biden on Thursday. But during the talks, the Israeli leader also emphasized his firm stance that he would only end the war once all goals have been achieved. The White House stated that President Biden welcomed Israel's joining in negotiations with the US, Qatar, and Egypt, and reaffirmed its strong support for Israel. The US government official also said in an online briefing that there is a pretty significant opening to reach a ceasefire agreement. Meanwhile, there has been an increase in fighting between Israel and Lebanese militant group Hezbollah. Hezbollah has targeted military bases in northern Israel with 200 rockets in total fired. The group says it is retaliation for an Israeli airstrike that killed a senior commander on Wednesday. An Israeli officer was killed by the strike, and Israel conducted airstrikes in southern Lebanon in response. Chesuhyung, Arirang News.
Also on the local front, the driver of the deadly car crash that led to over a dozen casualties Monday night claims his vehicle accelerated on its own and that his brakes failed to work. USINDOPACOM has the latest.
Police in Seoul have conducted their first interrogation on the driver behind the deadly car crash that killed 9 and injured 7 others near City Hall on Monday night. The questioning took place on Thursday at Seoul National University Hospital, where the driver is being treated with 4 investigators and a lawyer present. During the 2-hour interview, the driver reiterated his initial statement that it was a sudden unintended acceleration that caused the deadly accident. According to the 68-year-old driver, surnamed Cha, he tried to step on the brakes, but it was stiff and could not be pushed down. As Cha is still recovering from his injuries, the police plan to continue questioning at a later date. Additional investigations will be conducted to inquire about the basis for determining sudden unintended acceleration, whether there were any abnormalities during the vehicle operation, and why the driver was driving in the wrong direction in the first place. It has been confirmed that the driver had begun accelerating from the time he left a hotel parking lot, so he's also expected to be asked about the reason for speeding at the time. On top of that, the police will question Cha over why he drove towards a group of pedestrians on the sidewalk. Police also say that based on an ongoing analysis of the sedan's event data recorder, the suspect significantly pressed the accelerator shortly before the accident. They also discovered that the secondary brake light did not light up during the accident and that no skid marks were found at the scene, contradicting the driver's claim of having applied the brakes. A Seoul court on Wednesday denied an arrest warrant request by the police, saying that he has no reason to evade police question, as he's currently hospitalized and under police protection for his personal safety. 이승재, Arirang News.
Last week, we delivered a story about how Korean war heroes were being remembered, marking the 74th anniversary of the outbreak of the war. And this week, we take a look at the endeavors to bring home the remains of those who fought for the country but were never properly laid to rest. Yoon brings more.
Until we bring the last hero home. This is the mission of South Korea's Ministry of National Defense Agency for Killed in Action, Recovery and Identification, also known as MAKRI. The Korean War ended with an armistice over 70 years ago, but the remains of over 120,000 fallen soldiers have yet to be recovered. The organization is responsible for recovering the remains of those who died in the Korean War and returning them to their families. Director Lee Geun-won spoke to Arirang News about MAKRI's commitment to fulfilling the nation's responsibility and honoring those who sacrificed their lives.
We excavate remains, conduct inspections and genetic analysis to verify identities. With the Ministry of Patriots and Veterans Affairs, we ensure these individuals are interred with dignity at the National Cemetery, ensuring they receive the respect and honor they deserve.
However, not much evidence has survived the war to help identify fallen Korean soldiers. That means the most reliable method is genetic analysis, which underscores how important it is for living family members or descendants to provide DNA samples. Sample collection can be done across all of South Korea, with even distant relatives all the way to the 8th degree, which includes the children of third cousins able to provide vital clues.
Families can visit health centers, military bases, or veterans hospitals to provide samples. They can also call us at 1577-5625, and our staff will visit to collect samples directly.
International collaboration is also crucial, as the Korean War involved UN forces from over 20 countries. And identifying fallen soldiers is not just done using DNA. This year, a joint South Korea-US excavation was conducted in Mungyong City, located in Gyeongsangbuk-do Province. The excavation took place for 6 weeks until June 28th, and aimed to find the wreckage of a US military fighter jet that crashed in December 1950.
The pilot's remains from the crashed aircraft had already been recovered, but they were badly burned. So, in order to confirm the pilot's identity, parts with serial numbers from the plane were needed.
About 7,500 American soldiers remain missing to this day. Hoping to identify more remains of troops who went missing in action, South Korea's MAKRI and its U.S. counterpart, the DPAA, co-hosted the 3rd Indo-Pacific Scientific Summit this year, which came to Seoul for the first time.
The meeting provided a platform for experts in analyzing identities from different countries to share and discuss the latest insights in the field of forensic identification.
On its largest scale yet, over 60 experts from 11 countries were invited to the summit. MAKRI's director also demonstrated a strong commitment to continuing international exchanges to boost technical expertise. As part of that commitment, South Korean genetic analysis experts will be attending an academic conference in Spain later this year. South Korea's DNA analysis technology has become among the best in the world. However, the experts are in a race against time. The closer the familial relationship, the higher the accuracy. But close relatives of fallen soldiers are getting older.
If we cannot find and return these individuals to their families in our generation, they may remain unrecognized heroes forever. I believe a nation's dignity is defined by whom it chooses to remember.
Director Lee Geun-won made a promise to all the families awaiting news of their long-lost loved ones.
한시라도 빨리 마지막 한 분까지 끝까지 찾아서 가족과 조국의 품으로 돌려보내드릴 수 있도록 최선의 노력을 다하겠습니다.
이은희, 아리랑 뉴스.
The heat continued during the day today. However, tomorrow, another round of rain is expected. Starting with the west coast areas of Jeollabuk-do province tonight, the rain will expand to other parts of the country at dawn tomorrow. This rain will come back and forth during the weekend. As for the amount of rain, more than 120 millimeters is expected in Jeollabuk-do province, more than 100 in Chungcheongnam-do province, and up to 80 in southern areas of the Chungcheong-do provinces. On Sunday, rain of around 30 millimeters per hour is possible, mainly in the Chungcheong-do provinces and Jeollabuk-do province. Tomorrow, Seoul, Daejeon, Gyeongju, and Busan will start off at 23 degrees Celsius. It will move up to 29 in Seoul, Gwangju, and Jeju, 33 degrees Celsius. The rainy season will continue throughout the country next week. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Rishi Sunak called for an early general election only to give his place to the leader of the Labour Party, Sir Keir Starmer, following a landslide defeat. From 365 to around 120, thus the change in the number of seats the Conservative Party now has in the House of Commons. It shows how disappointed voters have been with the party. The Conservative Party's defeat after 14 years in government was not surprising, though, as the British public has had to suffer from negative outcomes of Brexit, the pandemic, and inflation, along with worsened public services. In the end, little more than perceived levels of competence have made sure that Labour is able to taste victory. With the seismic result in British politics, now it is Labour's task to bring about the change they promise, addressing some massive problems the country is facing. That's all for today. Thank you for watching.